Hey everyone, welcome back to another explainer. If you're a focused learner looking to completely maximize your time and actually master new information, well, you are in the perfect place today because we're going to completely dismantle everything you thought you knew about hitting the books. It's time for a major mindset shift. We're moving far away from that passive duration-based studying, where you just stare at a page for hours on end, and we're stepping directly into the science of active learning. I mean, think about why we default to these passive habits in the first place, right? The traditional school system essentially conditioned us to track hours logged rather than knowledge gained. We got praised for sitting quietly at our desks for long stretches, and that ingrained this totally false idea that time spent automatically equals material learned. Today, we are breaking that cycle. Okay, be honest with me for a second. Have you ever spent an entire weekend just absolutely buried in your books? Like you highlighted the whole chapter, you made those beautiful color-coded flashcards, and you genuinely felt like you finally got it? You were fully prepared. And then you sit down, the exam starts, the paper hits your desk, and your mind goes entirely blank. No way, right? If you've ever experienced that visceral, gut-wrenching frustration of putting in hours and hours of grueling work for literally zero results, I want you to mentally scream yes right now. Because this explainer isn't some generic advice for a random crowd. This is about you and fixing that exact moment of panic. So, to fix it, we first got to figure out what's actually broken. We're going to do a very fast, slightly aggressive audit of your most deeply ingrained study habits. I'm going to walk you through 5 warning signs that your current methods are actively working against your brain. Let's get into it. All right, warning sign number 1. Be totally honest with yourself here. Do you measure a good study session by how many hours you sat chained to your desk, or do you measure it by what you can actually recall without looking at your notes? The book we're referencing today points out this fascinating piece of science. The human brain's retention plummets dramatically after just 50 minutes of unbroken reading. Yet, for some reason, we still wear these 5-hour marathon study sessions like a badge of honor, essentially forcing our brains to run on fumes. Moving on to sign number 2. When you're rereading a chapter for the 3rd or 4th time, do you actually understand the core concepts? Or does the text just look familiar because your eyes have glazed over those specific words before? Think of it like this. It's exactly like blasting your favorite song 100 times. You know every single lyric, sure, but that absolutely does not mean you can sit down and play it on the piano. There is a massive, critical difference between simple recognition and true comprehension, and falling into that familiarity trap is exactly where most students fail. Okay, sign number 3, are you avoiding practice tests? Like, are you putting them off or skipping them entirely simply because you're scared of seeing how much you've actually forgotten? Let's be real for a moment. Are you secretly relying on the cozy comfort of reading your open notes because you're terrified of realizing you actually don't know the material yet? Are you just protecting your ego instead of actually testing your knowledge? Sign 4, and this one is a biggie. Have you fallen into the trap of honestly believing that you're just not a natural genius? Do you tell yourself you simply aren't smart enough for certain complex subjects like, say, advanced math or heavily detailed history? We tend to look at the top performers and assume they just have this genetic gift, entirely missing the fact that so-called natural genius is usually just a byproduct of invisible, highly efficient habits that absolutely anyone can learn. And finally, sign number 5, the dreaded tab switch. Is your brain constantly bouncing back and forth between a textbook and your phone, between a lecture and social media, all while falsely believing you're somehow still maintaining focus? The source material highlights a brutal reality about context switching. Every single time you glance at a notification, it takes your brain an average of 20 minutes to fully return to a state of deep, productive focus. You aren't multitasking. You're just continuously interrupting yourself. Okay, take a deep breath. If those 5 questions made you feel a little exposed just now, hey, welcome to the club. I totally get it. I know exactly how incredibly frustrating it is to put in all that work and see 0 results. But I really need you to hear this and internalize it. The problem is not you. It's not your IQ. It's not that you're lazy. Your brain is essentially this highly complex machine, and you simply haven't been handed the user manual yet. You just haven't been taught how it actually processes and stores information. Okay, let's dive into this. To fix all of this, we're pulling directly from the Insights and How to Study Like a Genius by Shadow Books. We're going to use the core philosophies of this brilliant source material today as that ultimate manual for your brain. The author operates on one huge premise. Effective learning is an active pursuit, not a passive absorption. So we're going to take the specific systems outlined in this book and systematically replace every single one of those 5 flawed study habits we just audited. Let's absolutely shatter this first myth right out of the gate. The book explains that tracking time, it's a complete lie. We've been conditioned our whole lives to believe that studying longer automatically equals learning more. But according to our source material, you can study for 6 whole hours passively and retain absolutely nothing. Zero. Conversely, you can do one highly focused hour and retain everything. To apply this, the book suggests setting outcome-based goals instead of time-based ones. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a rule. Instead of sitting down and saying, I'll study for 2 hours, you need to say, I won't stop until I can explain this specific chapter without my notes. Learning must be measured by understanding, not by duration. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we beat that familiarity trap we talked about earlier. It's a technique called active recall. The source clearly shows that rereading and highlighting are entirely passive habits. They give you a dangerously false sense of security. When you just reread, your brain isn't actually working. It's simply recognizing patterns it's seen before. To study like a genius, you gotta literally snap the book shut. You must force your brain to actively retrieve the information from scratch. It feels uncomfortable, sure, but that discomfort is the exact mechanism that builds strong neural pathways. So how do we get over that fear of testing we mentioned? Well, the book talks about this wild concept formerly known as desirable difficulty. Mental struggle is actually a biological sign that learning is happening. The friction of trying to remember something is exactly what signals the brain to encode it into long-term memory. Think about that for a second. If your studying feels incredibly easy, your brain is likely asleep at the wheel. Testing isn't just an assessment a teacher does to give you a grade. Testing is a vital, everyday learning tool that actively strengthens your memory. You absolutely have to embrace the struggle. And this brilliantly illustrates the truth behind the so-called gifted student. This book clearly shows that genius-level learners are not born with some magical ability. They don't just rely on being smart. They simply use better systems. For example, they use things like spaced repetition, which is deliberately reviewing material right before they're about to forget it, spread over several days, and they break complex formulas down into tiny microchunks. They build a logical scaffolding for their knowledge instead of trying to swallow the whole building at once. They rely on structure, not genetics. Then, of course, we have the ultimate modern distraction. The source material explains that multitasking is a literal memory killer. Your brain physically cannot do 2 complex things at once. It just can't. When you try, it just frantically switches back and forth between tasks. And all this does is completely drain your mental battery and ruin your capacity to learn. To counter this, the book highly recommends intense distraction-free sprints, often called the Pomodoro technique. You turn off your phone, focus completely for 25 solid minutes, and then you actually let your brain rest for 5 minutes. Deep focus is the only way forward. So the crucial point is this: why is it so hard to drop these bad habits? Well, it's deeply psychological. We default to safe methods, like rereading, because they don't hurt our ego. We avoid the hard stuff, like testing ourselves, because we don't want to feel like we're failing. You need a fundamental mindset shift, active effort. You must overcome your brain's biological desire for safety and comfort. You have to actively engage in difficult techniques. Taking the harder road right now actually saves you dozens of hours of repetitive studying in the long run. You've got to work with your brain's limits, not against them. And when you finally make that shift to active effort, boom, the result is durable memory. By swapping duration for understanding, rereading for active retrieval, and multitasking for deep focus, you build knowledge that actually lasts. You are entirely capable of learning anything you set your mind to. Let me repeat that, because it's important. You can learn literally anything. You just need the right structure. It's time to stop blaming your intelligence, start auditing your methods, and put these systems to work. All right, I want to leave you with one final, kind of tricky question to test if you're truly ready. Think about the very last thing you studied. If you had to teach that concept to a 5-year-old right now, making it simple and perfectly clear, would you actually be able to do it? This is famously known as the Feynman technique. If you can't simplify it to that basic level, you don't truly understand it yet. Let that sit with you. It is the ultimate test of true understanding. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer. Stay focused, and I'll catch you next time.